We want to talk about some of the other plays that have been taking place, and as he does each Friday, Alan Kelly is with us, CEO of the Bethesda-based consultancy, Playmaker Systems, which you can find at plays2run.com. That is Plays, the numeral 2run.com. And what we want to talk about today is something that he's been writing about, blogging about, the POTUS plays, the red herring. First, welcome back, as always. Glad to have you here.
Good morning. Good to see you again.
So what's a red herring? I know what a red herring is. I've heard of it before, but what is it in terms of a political play?
Yeah, there's many definitions there. Wall Street has a red herring. It's actually originally comes from a term in hunting, where they would use a rotted fish to slather across a path to distract dogs and to train hunting dogs. Mm-hmm. So we use it. It's at some point we've very carefully gone through to try to find the irreducibly unique units of influence, what we think are 24 stratagems. And ultimately we can describe them and say what the upsides, downsides, and all that are, but we have to come up with a name. And I think an appropriate name for the idea of distraction, mm-hmm. of getting somebody to go another direction that's away from the path you'd like them not to follow. Mm-hmm. A good name for it is the red herring.
Is this like a magician's misdirection?
It is misdirection.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Because one of the things that we always talk about when it comes to the press covering a story is you always have to be careful about the politician who's standing up there or the spokesperson who's standing up there like a magician saying, look at my left hand, and in his right hand is where the payoff is.
That's right.
Because you have to be careful to watch what the real story is as opposed to be listening to what they're talking about, reading between the lines. But what are the red herrings? What's the red herring this week for the president?
Well, I think that Andrew Sullivan, some people say the Obama apologist, the Newsweek reporter and Daily Beast guy, commentator, has posed the idea that Obama is a pretty good chess player. That mm-hmm. he doesn't just think one move ahead, which is more typical of any member of Congress or the administration or most administrations. He thinks two or three. And what he's saying, he's been writing about this for a couple of months in a couple of different ways. But what he's saying is that Obama will give in. He'll sacrifice a pawn to get a bishop. Mm-hmm. And generally his strategy is underestimated because it is so anathema to politicians to take a short-term hit, to do anything that will affect ratings or polling numbers or something like that. Obama does have that discipline. And I don't mean to be an Andrew Sullivan apologist, but I think he may have a point because we've seen Obama demonstrate this sort of discipline before. This is the guy who faced Reverend Wright. Mm-hmm. This is the guy who would say the word Muslim mm-hmm. about him or about the accusations of him. He will say the obvious, whereas, say, a Hillary Clinton will not. Mm-hmm. So he has range. He has strategic range. And with the table that we've established, we can see that he's going into one extreme. He runs attacking plays. He runs diverting plays. He has a lot of range, and that gives him a lot of ability to play ball.
Well, let's talk about the issue specifically. In this case, we're talking about birth control. We've heard an awful lot about the mandates for the health care program. The president originally said the current exemption is going to go away, although there's a year-long grace period, if you will, and this is some of the reaction we heard.
All these other masquerade games are not going to work it. There will be no compromise on the part of the bishops, on the part of the Catholic League.
Former governor of Massachusetts is an odd messenger on this.
I'm determined to see that this gets worked out, and I believe we can work it out.
There is absolutely nothing in this final rule that changes the original mandate that violates the religious freedoms.
Where are the women?
Back in my days, they used bare aspirin for contraceptives. The gals put it between their knees, and it wasn't that costly.
Now, that was Foster Freeze. Most recently, he was doing something on behalf of, he thought, Rick Santorum. He was appearing for him, and Rick Santorum had to back that back. But the point is, this has been a controversy. As a matter of fact, it's even come up in Massachusetts, where Senator Scott Brown has used it as a justification for the battle back against the president by producing a letter that then Senator Edward Kennedy wrote to Pope Benedict XVI, saying that there should remain this exemption for religious institutions. So Senator Edward Kennedy had asked for that. There had been Catholic bishops had come out against this, what had been offered or was taking place. And in addition to that, we even had people like E.J. Dionne and Mark Shields, who are fairly well-known liberal columnists. But your point here is that the president on Friday sort of pushed that off, did something that sort of said, I apologize. But what happens is he brings attention to the issue, and now it becomes an issue about contraception or women's rights as opposed to religious freedom, which is I guess, what Andrew Sullivan is sort of saying all along.
If I break it down, then at least in our system, what I think that I saw two moves. The president basically came out. I know he's doing a lot of soft sounding, over the course of coming up to this. Trial balloons and plays are called pings, but ultimately he came down with a play that we have talked about before. It's your favorite, the fiat. Mm-hmm. It's a name for a dictated order. He says, okay, we shall do this, and
gets great MPG, by the way.
Thank you very much. And so he did that, and you'd have to think that he knew that he'd be overplaying his hand, but he played it, and then he immediately compromised. And so you look back in that, as Joe Scarborough said, could he be that, in essence, could he be that smart or could he be that dumb?
Well, let's
get
hear
the
what he
feeling
said.
that he is involved in misdirection.
You mentioned Andrew Sullivan. You wrote in your blog, the president was laying a trap. Andrew Sullivan suggested sacrificing a short-term ratings hit for the long-term electoral advantage. And Joe Scarborough was talking about this on Meet the Press Sunday.
Well, let me just say Andrew Sullivan's piece is preposterous because he claims...
This is a Newsweek.
Andrew Sullivan claims that Barack Obama saw this coming all along and he was just setting his enemies up into a trap, which means that he was trying to set Joe Biden up in a trap and John Kerry up in a trap.
Okay, so that was his take on that, although he did go on to say
point.
that there were some points that Andrew Sullivan made which are right, which is if it becomes about contraception, it's a problem for Republicans because if it's religious freedom, but it's no longer about that given the president's compromise. But that's what he is saying, is that you can't say that he's smart and stupid simultaneously, just as Scarborough has said that the Republicans can't say that the president is a socialist and he's Jimmy Carter.
That's right. At this point in Obama's term, the GOP and his rivals have to start thinking and being a bit paranoid of his abilities to play misdirection. That they can't just judge him on the single move. They have to be fearful that he's thinking 2 and 3 moves ahead. And it seems to me the evidence is there that this is what has happened here, because he has played it hard. He has taken a short-term hit. He's come back, and he is nonetheless, he has made progress that he can claim in November for legislating, for actually governing and getting the job done. And that may matter more in November than the hit that he takes in February.
And isn't that kind of a weapon in and of itself? I mean, for people who go back as long as I do, you can remember Ryan Duran was a pitcher for the New York Yankees, and he had a fastball.
I thought you could talk about Doc Ellis.
Well, no, but Ryan Duran had these really thick glasses, like Coke bottle glasses, and they'd sort of steer him out to the mound, and he would throw the really high heat, and he would miss the plate, and he would throw one, and it would hit the backstop. And
Where are we going here?
The problem is that you never knew if he was going to throw a strike. And in the case of the president, you just can't figure out, is he really being smart about this? In other words, you're trying to outthink him, and so you get delayed in your response because you're trying to think of what he's actually trying to do. And in a sense, that's a weapon itself, isn't it?
This is something we talk about in our war games and workshops with clients, is that it is important not to be entirely predictable. It's important to understand what we call your signature, the plays that you like to run, that you prefer to run. That's fine, but at times you need to vary the pitching, the repertoire, if you will, and you have to, at this point, you have to think Obama's got a lot of pitches that he can throw, and you don't necessarily know which one he's doing.
We don't have time to do it today, but I do want to get into negative advertising with you at some point, because we have plenty of time to do that. I mean, we got a whole year. But negative
advertising gets my goat.
It does?
Sure, because it's not negative. It's competitive. And it's constructive, but it's called negative advertising. The play they're running on to call it negative is a label. Mm-hmm. The people who receive negative advertising are actually sensitive to the fact that they're receiving constructive and competitive information about them. And so what do? And rather than respond to it, they say, well, that's just negative, which is sort of a catchword for that's somehow, immoral and inappropriate.
Unseemly.
It is unseemly. But, aside from the intonations that a lot of, negative ads run, it's generally somehow fact-based, and it's facts and material that you have to deal with, which are fairly put onto the public record. So I just got a problem with negative advertising because it's somehow, as my mother from Nebraska would say, just a little bit wrong. But I don't think so. I think it's a little bit right.
Really? Okay. Well, we'll deal with more of this.
Hi, Mom.
It's not going away. It's not going away between now and next week. We'll talk to you next week, okay?
You bet. Bye-bye.
Alan Kelly, and again, plays to run, PLAYS, the numeral 2, run.com.